Greetings, fellow conspirators. It is I, LG Grande, the new number 6. Good to have you here on a new Liberty Conspiracy video. This will be your news update for Monday morning. In fact, we can join together in this, in the informed plot for greater freedom. Now, here's what we're looking at for Monday, May 18th. Your news update with a little tag at the end for one of the big stories, which will end up becoming one of the pieces for intellectual ammunition for a larger video later on. All right, let's start off with Newsmax.com, where the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Mr. Azar, a wonderful constitutional position that one is, isn't it? Happened to appear on television, and this gentleman said, hey, guess what? There's no spike in coronavirus in the places that are reopening. As you can see here, he was on CNN's State of the Onion, and the Health and Human Services Secretary said, we're seeing that in places that are opening, we're not seeing this spike in cases. Okay, so Cowabunga 19 is not something that is reappearing to the extent that we were told very early on. Well, that's okay. We'll find out more. Since they have no numbers on numerators or denominators, they don't know how many people have been infected. They've been surprised to find out that more people were infected than they imagined early on, and they didn't show any symptoms. That has a bearing on a later story. So there's that one. If you want to find that, if you're a friend of mine over at Facebook, it'll be over there. Just wanted to give you that quick information. This one, coming out for Monday over at MRC TV, is one that I wrote up Sunday night, and this is a big one for those people who are worried about the United Nations, and justifiably so. It is a massive boondoggle and sucks up all sorts of money, redistributes it, and creates all sorts of havoc all around the world, and of course is becoming a greater and greater threat to people's civil liberties everywhere. UN chief ups his globalist ante, demands complete COVID-19 reshape of world economy for green sustainability. As you can see, this one has not yet been published as I record this, and I already wrote a piece about this earlier for MRC TV, and I'll probably shoot a video on this for MRC TV, but just to let you know, this all has to do with seeing that the economy is more centralized to fight Cowabunga 19 and rechannel money into the now damaged economy and make sure that that money goes to the special industries that the head of the UN would like to see grow. Those being, of course, green industries. Yes, indeedy. This is what he said a little while ago in a video. What is needed is a large-scale, coordinated, and comprehensive multilateral response amounting to at least 10% of global GDP. He wants a global tax, by the way. We must massively increase the resources available to the developing world. We. Isn't it interesting how they always use that forced collective we? It's almost like there was a Russian dissident named Zemyatin who wrote a book called We, and how dangerous that collective is when it's imposed on you and you are brought in as part of the we, even though you haven't been given a choice. It was called We, and it was part of the inspiration for 1984 and also inspired Ayn Rand. But anyway, look it up, check it out. But if you get a copy, don't read the introduction to it because it'll spoil the book. I did, and it spoiled the book. It's a good book, though. Yeah, so they're going to be pushing this over and over again. They're going to continue to do this. They're going to be looking for money to come from the IMF. And, of course, the IMF, as I mentioned, is an international organization that's funded through lending by UN member states, nearly 1/5 of which comes from U.S. taxpayers. And as the Cato Institute reported in 1998, they said that by 1989, U.S. involvement with the IMF had already added $4.6 billion to the national debt. And, of course, the United States provides 20% of the funds for this 193 state member bureaucracy. All right, now, next, I want to turn to the great, the awesome Guns and Gadgets channel on YouTube. And if you're not watching Guns and Gadgets, I hope you certainly do. Guns and Gadgets is the place to go for your Second Amendment information. And as you can see, he has lots of subscribers, 246,000. And I'm not going to be playing this video, but I want you, if you have an opportunity, to please go over and check this video out at the Guns and Gadgets channel, published on May 16th, the Untraceable Firearms Act of 2020, brought to you by none other than Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut and Chris Murphy of Connecticut and a bunch of others. Murphy, part of the great fighting propaganda bill that came up during the Obama final year in 2016 that led to $150 million per year for 2 years being handed out to dying dinosaur news media if they would just play good with the government and promote the government line. So, of course, you know, they were giving bailouts, I'm sure, to all sorts of people that they liked. And Trump did not renew that. It was part of the NDAA that Obama signed into law. Wonderful. Call it law. There's a difference between natural law and statute. The item that Obama signed and turned into statute in the end of December of 2016. So this Untraceable Firearms Act, the big thing I want to bring up about this one, and I hope you will inform yourself if you get the opportunity. If you're not part of the viewership of this great channel, please check him out. He's awesome. The key thing about this, and he makes a great point here, is that this is predicated on Trump's move on the gun stock ban. And he did that through executive order. And first of all, it wouldn't be constitutional even if they had a law that banned bump stocks. But the bump stock ban that Trump initiated through executive order opened the doors to now the Congress simply asking, not even passing laws, asking the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And of course, that's not constitutional either. And we're going to open up a whole door on this later. We'll talk about this separately. We'll talk about ATF stuff. We'll talk about guns. We'll talk about the Second Amendment in a separate video. So this could act as an appetizer for a larger piece. Many of these items can be leap points for larger stories that we'll cover. But this one, he makes a great point. This isn't even going to be a statute that's passed. It's just going to be something where this coming from the Senate, if it passes the Senate, which it probably won't, but it's going to be very close because many people don't want to see, even the Rhino Republicans out there, they're willing to make sure that the ATF gets on top of the so-called homemade guns. And this is one of the things that they are going to try to go after. And of course, the criminals aren't going to care about this in any way whatsoever. It all has to do with trying to disarm civilly minded people who understand their rights. The Untraceable Firearms Act of 2020. If you're building your own firearms, you better watch out. 3D printed firearms, you better watch out. Uppers, lowers, better watch out. If you're a tinkerer, if you like to make things yourself and try to make firearms yourself, you could be in a lot of trouble because of this law. Thanks to Richard Blumenthal, who claimed that he was a Vietnam vet, and that was found to be patently untrue. Whether, you know, people are impressed with Vietnam veterans and what they had to go through or not, the guy was a liar, and it just is despicable to see what this guy is like. And I got to say, Jared from Guns and Gadgets is just awesome, and he picks up on this stuff very quickly. He did a great job. I'll turn to a little lighter story. This one, academics say using wedding or family photo for Zoom background is offensive. Unbelievable. If an attendee, as you see here, this comes originally from the College Fix, which is a great website, and I wanted to give a little tip of the hat to WND as well. They're also very good. More on the paleo-conservative side, but no, they're pretty good on many things. If an attendee of a virtual meeting has an image of his or her, heterosexual wedding as his or her virtual background, he or she, is committing a microaggression. So says a pair of researchers at Michigan State University through a press release. Of course, I'm sort of misreading that. Unbelievable. This is a state-funded school which shouldn't exist at all, and they're using people's tax money to support idiots like this, to talk about microaggressions. This is why we continually try to refer people to postmodernism and semiotics and how they've been used as weapons for decades to try to attack people for their speech and read things into things that people say that they had no intention of implying in any way whatsoever. This has been done in literature for decades, and if you went through a public high school or you went to college and took a lit class, you must have experienced so-called deconstructionism in literature. It's perfectly fine to imagine another meaning, But that's your imagination. Unless you confirm it, it's just your imagination. So don't screw with the ideas of writers and say, oh, you really meant this. Oh, you had an underlying assumption, or you were secretly racist or prejudiced or something like that. Utterly bogus. It's an attack on people. Most often, these are authors who are dead and they could never even defend themselves in the first place. It's just despicable, just ridiculous. And this is just absurd, stupid nonsense. Here's another crazy thing. This one coming out of the UK. It's been shown, this is documented. UK spends over $1 million of taxpayer money to fly women from Ireland to England for abortions. Incredible. And this is from numerous sites. This one, Curated News, April 6th. This is a little bit old, but I wanted to make sure I brought this up to you because this will show you how everybody has to fight over what happens in a government-run health system. The UK government spent over £1 million in a year funding women from Northern Ireland to go to little typo there, England for abortions. Approximately £1.08 million of taxpayer cash was spent in 2018-2019 on the cost of abortion procedures, travel, and accommodation. Health and social care. Why do you need somebody like that? They're just going to get in the way of people making their own choices. They're just going to get in the way of private philanthropy. They're just going to redirect money and create hangers-on, which is exactly what we have here. And now the moral implication of abortion is tied into this. And everybody expects that this health care is a right. No, you don't have a right to anything. We said that before. You have a right from, to be left alone. If you have a right to, that means that you have a claim on someone else. That means you're calling someone else your slave. In this case, they're calling the doctors slaves, and they're not really doing so. The taxpayers are the ones who are enslaved, and then they give the money to the doctors. But if you pull out the middleman and stop taking the money from the taxpayer and forcing him to work X number of hours a day to pay for the health care of people, you just apply that force to the doctors, you're seeing the force manifest in its face right there. But they would never do that. They'd never say, oh, we're going to enslave all the doctors, right? Yeah, even though they say there's a right to health care. Okay, the minister, Helen Whatley, revealed the figures in response to a parliamentary question by pro-life MP Fiona Bruce, who I'm sure is probably despised by many people in labor. Oh, how dare her. You know, it wouldn't matter whether it was abortion or anything else. If they're taking money from people to fund teddy bears, they shouldn't do it. This just makes it even more extreme for people to start to recognize. And of course, the battle and debates are out of control. People say, oh, it's your religious beliefs, you're Catholic, blah, blah, blah. How about just believing in leaving someone alone, whether it be the fetus or it be perhaps the taxpayer who might be forced to pay for it? We'll talk about life and when it begins, the logical syllogism behind that, which is inescapable, at another time. The figures for 2019-20 could be significantly higher, as the Conservative government announced last year that they would expand the scheme to include any abortion procedure that is legal in England and Wales but not in Northern Ireland. Oh, how nice. How sweet. I've got a hangnail. Fly on over. Oh, it's legal. You can get it. You can call on somebody else to pay for your hangnail over in Northern Ireland. It's no problem. Theft is fine for a hangnail. It's ridiculous. Now, I want to turn to this, as you can see on the screen. Gary Franchi, awesome. Next News Network, love Gary's stuff. Gary's fantastic. I really dig him. Oh, by the way, as a quick aside, I am wearing my Nerdrotic shirt. Yeah, talk about Gary. Gary Bigler. Gary, if you're watching this, I love you, man. I love you. You are awesome. And folks, if you don't know Nerdrotic's channel, watch it. He gets it. He's totally awesome. And I would have my assortment of Doctor Who figures and Star Wars figures and Star Trek action figures and stuff back here. But I don't want to do a play on his fantastic studio. And also, I really, really admire all the things that what so-called Fandom Menace does. Just awesome. You guys are great. So we'll get to Overlord DVD in a little while. Yeah, Doomcock is great too. Doomcock, hats off to you, brother. Okay, so this from Gary Franchi, the Next News Network, and Gary's been assaulted tons by YouTube's algorithms and censors. But Gary is a pro-freedom guy. I hope you check him out and watch for him also at his website. And I think he's over on BitChute. But he was in a conversation here that I thought was pretty interesting. This is Pennsylvania State Senator Douglas Mastriano. And this is about his government. And there are numerous individuals who are bringing suit against various governors, particularly mostly Democrats, for trampling on the Bill of Rights during this Cowabunga 19 crackdown. Closing up businesses, which is completely contrary to the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the Eighth Amendment, and the 14th Amendment. It's a taking without compensation. It's extrajudicial application of the law. There's no day in court for these people. They're being punished without trial. In addition to that, it's a breach of the contract clause in many cases, and I'll expand on this. I have plans to do larger, more in-depth videos about some of these things, particularly the contract clause in the Constitution and how the contract clause is infringed when the governors shut down businesses like this. And it has to do with pre-existing contracts that might be interfered with by the governors, and that is completely verboten by the U.S. Constitution. Anyway, that's on the constitutional level. If you want to go deeper than that, we can get into the voluntarist position, which is my position, which is that it's completely unethical to have any sort of state interfering with individuals who are peacefully engaging in anything. And the state itself is an interference in peaceful transactions and an imposition that is immoral. But we'll get into that in another time. In fact, towards the end of this little segment, I'll give you a little heads up about some of that sentiment and logic. But in this case, he was talking about how they are bringing a suit against their governor, Governor Wolf. I featured Governor Wolf in an MRC TV video recently as he was talking about read a book to all those people that he's shut down. Oh, while you're inside, because of me, it's a great time to read a book. I love books. And he's got this library around him, you know. Just unbelievable arrogance and conceit. But in this case, they talk about the closures. And what's very interesting, prior to this little segment that I'm going to play, is the Senator Douglas Mastriano, who's a former military man, and that has a bearing in just a minute. He mentions that some of the closures and the expressions of what are necessary or unnecessary, essential or non-essential businesses were very strange. And for example, the governor decided that certain car dealerships were essential businesses, while other car dealerships were not essential businesses. So he's like, we're going to have to check that out on that level and see whether or not there was any glad handling there for political favorites. But in addition to that, he also talks a little bit about their Pennsylvania Secretary of Health and Human Services, Rachel Levine. And this is unbelievable. She, like they did in New York, shipped a bunch of people who were positive with the Cowabunga virus into nursing homes. And get what she did. Check this out.
Now let's talk about what happened on Monday. You held a rally in Harrisburg, formally calling for the resignation of the Secretary of Health, Levine. Could you explain the latest on this?
Yeah. So on Monday, and we know a lot more today than we did Monday, but I was looking at the record of our Secretary of Health. It just, I would say, medical malpractice and gross incompetence. And that's, once again, a hyperbole. Here's why I say that, why I demanded the resignation of Levine. Levine came out 2 months ago saying, hey, this virus has proved to be extremely fatal to those with certain conditions and also to the elderly. So we have to protect our elderly. And then on the 18th of March, Levine issued a memo, an order saying that elder care homes, long-term assisted homes, have to take back COVID-19 positive patients from hospitals to free up hospital beds in Pennsylvania. So they took positive cases, put them into nursing homes, and unleashed a plague amongst the most vulnerable. And that's resulted in 2/3 of all our deaths in Pennsylvania have come from these homes as a result of Levine's mismanagement and gross negligence, and also 2/3 of our cases statewide. So I went up and with great flair went to the governor's office in the Capitol building, and he's not there. The door's locked. So the guy's missing in action. He's absent without leave. So we had to email it to him. The next day we come to find out that while Levine is ordering COVID-19 positive folks back in the nursing home and assisted care systems, that he decided to take out Mom, the secretary's own mom get mom out of the facility and has his mom in Hershey Lodge in safety with 24/7 care. So this is true elitism. Do as I say, not as I do, and going to look out for mom, realizing that mom was going to be vulnerable there, but the rest of you, your parents, grandparents don't matter. I mean.
Okay, now just going to quickly turn over here. Here's a quick review of the story. This one coming from Newsweek. Pennsylvania Health Secretary moved mother out of nursing home as coronavirus death toll increased in state. And you can see here the Health Secretary, Dr. Rachel Levine, confirmed on Tuesday that she recently moved her 95-year-old mother out of a personal care home. It's just unbelievable. Unfriggin' believable, man. It's amazing. And now for the final story, very quickly, I want to give this to you in the news update roundup. This one. This comes from, of course, Activist Post. Great job from Tyler Durden. Big thumbs up, Tyler. You do great work all over the place. So many websites. TSA to check passengers' temperature at airports. Oh, how nice. Now, first of all, this imposition has so many vectors of impositions inside the fist. It's like a spiked fist of impositions. It's unbelievable. And it traces so far back that I'll have to do an entire video on the history of how the U.S. government got its fingers into regulating airports and the air routes themselves, how the FAA grew. But right now, I just want to mention, not only is this practically ridiculous, not only is this another added infringement on the Fourth Amendment, which they already breach as a matter of course in the TSA. This is an example of what are called unconstitutional conditions. Unconstitutional conditions, one and all. It's a term we're going to explore in a larger educational video for intellectual ammunition to take with you that has to do with the constitutional side of things about what happens when the U.S. government or any government imposes a condition on something that you could get, or they say that they're giving to you from the government. So, for example, and I will expand on this with writing and typing and all sorts of information in a separate video, okay? And what I think I'm probably going to do is once a week, I'll do the intellectual ammunition wrap-up with at least one, probably two stories so that you can carry these with you and they will be timeless. You can take them wherever you want. They might hinge on immediate stories, but years from now you can watch the whole video and it would still be very valid because the information in it, which is taken from the leap point of something, can be used at any time. Unconstitutional conditions are, as I said, instances where governments tell people that in order to get something that the government supposedly gives to them, they must give up something or comply in some way. So, for example, the greatest example of it is the Cabrini Green Supreme Court case from over 20 years ago, where there was a shooting in a parking lot in the Cabrini Green Section 8 housing complex just outside of Chicago. And in response, and a child was killed by the stray fire. In response to it, the government authorities demanded that if anyone wanted to live in the place, they would have to give up their Fourth Amendment, supposedly protected by the Fourth Amendment right against unwarranted searches and seizures. Supposed to have a warrant, a public document issued by a judge on the judge's decision that there is probable cause to go into a place. It has to name the person who's going to be searched and the items for which the officials are searching. Therefore, if you actually look at the Constitution and understand it, you'll understand that highway pullovers telling you, oh, I want to search your car, the cop, have probable cause, completely out of whack with the original intent of the Fourth Amendment. But that being said, unconstitutional conditions, It was found, the ACLU got on top of this one, surprisingly, and they were good on this one. Sometimes they're not so good on private property issues, but they got on this one. It's not really private property. In this case, it was a privacy issue. So they're better on privacy issues. But there are a lot of other really good organizations like Institute for Justice and things like that that do a really good job for private property owners. But they got on top of this, and they brought it all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the people who were living there and against the government. They said, no, you can't just say that in order to get whatever it is that the government's going to give to someone, that they have to give up their rights. You can't do that. Now, strangely enough, as I mentioned during the conversation with Liberty Doll on Friday night on the 15th, Hillsdale College and Grove City College also ran into an unconstitutional conditions case, and they lost when the government was trying to tell them they had to conform to Title IX if they had any students that were getting federal funds or anything like that, or loans that went eventually to the schools. So they both separated completely from anything from the federal government might offer. Even students who might get federal loans, they said, no, we're not going to take you. So they started up their own scholarship programs. Now, if you were to go to the Supreme Court about the TSA, this is clearly an unconstitutional condition. I mean, hands down, not a chance. It's unquestionably so. Now they want to take people's temperatures. But if you were to go to the Supreme Court, I think you and I both know that the Supreme Court would find that it's not. They'd make up something. Some rationale to say, oh, well, the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply here. Well, sorry, first of all, these aren't federal airports. Federal government, there's nothing in the Constitution that lets them go into the airports in the first place or regulate air travel or anything like that. We'll discuss that larger in a larger video later, the creation of the FAA and how that's unconstitutional. But this is a clear example of an unconstitutional condition. It's extremely important that people understand this stuff. Very important. Use the terminology. Drive it into people's skulls. And this sort of thing is going to happen over and over and over again. The larger the federal government gets. Interestingly enough, as my friend Michael pointed out, my friend Mike Greer pointed out on Facebook, I brought up, there are so many reasons that people might be overheated. They might be in a hurry, whatever it might be. Maybe it's just their body temperature. And Mike said, yeah, the other thing is you can have the virus and be completely asymptomatic. We're starting to see those numbers already. So this is ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. But again, the police state encroaches. So I wanted to give you that information. I hope everybody will return for more news updates, and I hope you'll head over to check out things like the Next News Network and also Guns and Gadgets, and of course, Nerdrotic, because Nerdrotic's awesome. And I will be seeing you here in the comments section. I'll see you at MRC TV, and I'll also see you at BitChute. Thanks for watching, everybody. Be seeing you.